Okay, so continuing on from the previous lesson, what we're going to do now is start to take a look at this concept of the vertex groups. Now, before we do this, let me just point this out. When you have the armature selected and when you are in pose mode, this is a non-destructive mode. This means that when we press the R key to rotate, press the S key to scale, press the G key to move this bone, and if you switch to edit mode, the bones will simply place themselves back the way they were in edit mode only. Okay? Now, if you go to pose mode again, and if you want to reset this bone, you have to do Alt R to reset the rotation, Alt G to reset the location, and Alt S to reset the scale. So we can actually press the A key to select everything and do Alt R G S. Okay? So this is how you reset all the bones in pose mode so they snap back to the way they should be, how they have been placed in edit mode. So what's important here is that when you go into edit mode and have something selected, you do not want to move these bones once you've placed them. And the most important part here is you do not want to do Alt R or on any of these bones, because when you do Alt R, it will simply reset the roll. So we're going to talk about this concept of the roll a little later. Now, because the bones are quite tiny, you can actually go into edit mode when you are posing your character and developing it and accidentally press Alt R. And when you have bones that are tiny, you're not going to see that the bowl had reset. And you might forget that you did that, and you might start to go into pose mode and start posing your bones. So this will basically mess up your alignment of the bones in edit mode. So make a note of that. Okay, it's only in pose mode that you can do Alt R G S safely. So anyways, so now that we have seen that from the previous lesson that we can click on this figure, click on it and drop it onto the armature, here we can state that only add the armature deform modifier, right? And now when we have the figure selected and click on the modifier, we already know that we simply have to just move this up. Now notice this, when we click on this figure and actually drag it out and clear the parent, then go over here and manually add the armature, and then go over here and select the armature as the object, you'll see that the figure did not become the child of the armature, meaning that the figure does not have to be the child of the armature in order for you to pose the bones and have the vertices follow them. But it's strongly recommended that you drop the figure and make it a child of the armature. So over here, when you select it, this is how it should be. Even though Blender allows you to do this, drag it out and add the armature, you should always make sure that the object is the child of the armature. Okay? Okay, so we're going to actually leave this over here and go ahead and move this up and make sure that in your subsurf you have it set on level 1. So what we're going to do now is take a look at this concept over here, vertex groups. Basically, we want to understand how do the vertices actually follow these bones. Do shift middle mouse button to zoom over here where the arm is. Go ahead and having the figure selected, I want you to go into edit mode over here, do A to select everything and then A to deselect everything. Go ahead and actually over here click on this plus sign in the data tab over here for the vertex groups. So when you click on this plus sign, it's basically going to add an empty vertex group. It's empty, meaning that no vertices are actually using this vertex group. So over here, go ahead and click on this vertex, press the shift key down, this one, and this one. You can press the period key on your numpad to home in on this section over here so you can do the middle mouse button. So when you have vertices selected like this, right, the most simple use of vertex groups is to simply assign these vertices to this group. So if we come over here and assign them, we can now deselect them and select them. So of course you can use this concept in its most basic form to select the different parts of your body. Imagine selecting the teeth or the eyes very quickly. Okay. Now, if we click on the armature over here and now switch to pose mode, click on this bone, press shift middle mouse button to just move it over here, press the R key, you can see that none of the vertices are going to be moving. Okay. Now click on this figure and switch back to edit mode by pressing the tab key. Now, this vertex groups is no longer an empty vertex group. Vertices are assigned to it. Okay. Now we're going to take a look at how to use this section, this panel over here for vertex groups, because it has quite a bit of functions over here that we need to understand. You want to be comfortable with using this because it's going to be used when it comes to rigging. So if we want to move these vertices with this bone, the way Blender does this is the fact that you can assign vertices to vertex groups if you simply just name the vertex groups to the same exact name as a bone that you have in your armature. These vertices will start to follow this bone. So let's actually do that. Let's click on the armature first and click on this bone. The reason we're doing this is because we don't want to type the bone name. So when we click on this bone, we can see the name of the bone over here. Hover your mouse and do Control C. Now go ahead and click on the figure in the outliner, and now you can press the tab key to go into edit mode. Now over here, we're just going to click this. Now the vertices don't even have to be selected. If you double click this and do Control V and press the enter key, right now what we've done is simply rename this vertex group. See, we can deselect and select the same vertices. Now if you click on the armature, which will still be in pose mode over here, and now when you press the R key, you can see that the vertices are right now following this bone. So this is how Blender uses the concept of the vertex groups to force vertices to follow these individual bones. Okay, so what this would mean is that if we click on this figure and press the tab key, now we can actually add more vertices to this. So we can click on this vertex, press the shift key down, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, right? It doesn't matter what you select, right? So when you select this, you can now make sure that you've selected on the vertex group and just click on assign again. Now when you do deselect and select, it's going to select more vertices. Let's even select this one, this one, this one, this one. Now do this thing again, assign and deselect and then select. Okay, I'm going to talk about this concept in detail a little later. But now when you switch to the armature and click on this bone and press the R key, you can see that the more vertices we add, they will simply start to follow wherever this bone goes. Okay, so this is how this concept of the vertex groups is going to work. Now if you click on the figure and switch back to edit mode by clicking on the tab key, and now over here if you remove this, right, having everything selected, make sure you do select and then remove. Now when you do deselect or select, nothing's going to work. So if we do A to deselect and try to select anything, you'll see that now this is just an empty vertex group, just like what it was before when we click on the plus sign. Okay, so go ahead and click on this and minus it. So this means that this is just an empty vertex group, no vertices are using it. And of course, if we go back to the armature and click on this bone again, press the R key, no vertices are going to follow this bone. Okay, so if you click on this figure and go ahead and now delete this. Okay, so now you understand what it means when it says that this is an empty vertex group. So if we click over here on the figure and drag it out, okay, you already know that when we drag it out, the armature will remove. The armature deform modifier will remove. Now if you click on this figure and drop it on top of the armature, you'll see that you get this option over here with empty groups. So it's going to add the armature deform modifier, and it's going to create the empty groups. So basically what's going to happen is that Blender is going to take a look at your armature and all the bones that you've created and create empty groups with the same exact name that match all your bones. Go ahead and click this. So you'll see that the armature is added again, so we have to move it up. Now when we click on vertex groups, you're going to see all the vertex groups created for your bones. So how did Blender do this, right? So if you click on this bone and now click on the bone tab, you can see over here that we have this bone marked as deform. Actually, every bone is marked as deform. So this means that this bone, when it's moved, it's going to deform your mesh as long as there are vertex groups and vertices are assigned to these vertex groups. Now, if you uncheck this, then Blender is not going to create a vertex group for this bone. Okay, so what we're going to do is actually check this first, click on the figure, and click over here. Okay, so let's first of all go ahead and click on this little plus sign over here and go find the name of this bone. So here we can just type inside dev.arm.upper. So this is the vertex group, which is an empty vertex group that Blender created. See how we're just going in circles? So if we click on the figure and now switch to edit mode and click on these vertices, having this vertex group selected, we can just simply do assign. So we can do deselect and select to make sure that it assigned the vertices. Now, of course, if we click on the armature and now have this bone selected in pose mode, when we press the R key, you'll see that we're just doing the same thing that we did manually, right? So now click on this and go into edit mode, and now we can simply have this vertex group selected and make sure that the vertices are selected and click on remove. So now again, if I do A to deselect everything over here and try to select it, this is now again an empty vertex group. Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually take this and drag it out over here. Okay, now if you drag it out, you'll notice that it's going to remove the armature deform modifier. But if we click on the data tab, you'll see that if we remove everything from here, all the vertex groups are still intact. So it's not going to delete the vertex groups for you. Okay, once they have been created, you have to click over here and manually delete all of them. Now, what would happen if we click on this and drag it over here? Now, when we do empty vertex groups, it's simply just going to recreate the vertex group if they don't exist. Okay, so if we go in here and now delete all the vertex groups out of here, okay, and what we're going to do is actually drag this out again, and now actually click on the armature first, click on this bone, go to the bone tab, and now uncheck this box, deform for this bone. Okay, now if you click on the figure, select the figure in the outliner, click right over here and drag it onto the armature and do empty groups. Now when we have the figure selected and click over here, and now if we type in dev.arm.upper again to find it, dev.arm.upper, you'll see that there is no .l. Okay, and this is because when we click on this armature, click on this bone, click on the bone tab, it does not have this checked. So when we are creating the non-deformed bones to drive these deformed bones, all those bones will have this deform option unchecked. Only the bones that are going to be deforming your character must have this checked. Okay, so now if we actually go ahead and click on the figure and just drag it out, and now if you click on this and now drag it back onto the armature and do with empty groups, of course it's just going to create that vertex group for you. See, now it's appearing. Now, of course, this means that, okay, well, if we press the tab key and click on these vertices, and now having this vertex group selected, assign them, and then do deselect and select to confirm that you did assign them. And now when you click on the armature, click on this bone, press the R key, you'll see that it's moving. But when you go to the bone tab and now uncheck this, and now click on this bone and press the R key, you'll see that it's not going to move the vertices because we've told it that this bone is no longer a deformed bone, even though the vertex group actually does exist for this bone. Right? So it's a requirement that the bone must have this deform checked, and it needs to have the vertex group created for it, and the vertices need to be assigned to the vertex group for these individual bones for these vertices to actually follow wherever the bone goes. Now, since we have this working, what I want you to notice is that if we zoom in over here and press the tab key and click on this bone and press the R key to move, you'll notice that the vertices are basically acting like children. The distance that they keep from this bone is always exact. Okay, so if we just rotate this over here, actually click on this figure, click on the object tab, and over here we'll just enable wire and make sure draw all edges is on. Now go ahead and click on this bone. Remember, the figure is not in edit mode, it's in object mode. Because we have this on for the figure, for the draw wire, it's going to show up over here also in object mode. Right, so if I click on this figure, you can see it's in object mode, we can see the wire. Now click on this. Now if you press the R key to rotate this, now if you press the R key, actually press the R key 2 times, you can rotate this any way you want. Now notice that how the bones, how the vertices are acting like children. They are keeping their distance intact wherever this bone moves, right? Meaning that over here, when we click on this distance for this bone, because this bone is a child, is always kept intact. So when we press the R key to move this, see, the child always keeps that same distance. So when it comes to the vertices, they also do this. Okay. Now later on, you'll see that we can actually control this distance on the vertices. This is what's going to give us the ability to create much more realistic movements. Because these vertices are only following one bone, that's all they know how to do. But later on, you'll see that we can tell these vertices to follow multiple bones. So this means that when we click on this bone and press the R key to move, it's going, the distance of these vertices is going to be influenced by how many bones are interacting with them. So you'll see how this works a little later. Okay, so here I'm just going to go ahead and just reload the file that we had saved before. So there is no armature deform on the figure, and there are no vertex groups, and basically the figure's over here. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lesson where we will talk about these concepts in more depth now.